Right. We are in this thing. Channels are all linked up. Hey, y'all. Hey, everybody. Thank you for joining. We're so glad that you're here. If you're joining us on Facebook, welcome. If you're joining us on YouTube, welcome as well. My name is Brandi. I am your host and the one who is going to be doing the part of the conversation. But Hey Girl Hey is a place and a space to allow where I bring in mental health professions, therapists, and anybody who has gone through their own beauty transformation, working from the inside out, starting with the mindset and any of the hurts that we have in our hearts, and being able to be fully ourselves. So, thank you for joining Hey Girl Hey with Brandi. Now, I do want to put this out here just to kick us off before I introduce our guest speaker, Kiva Harper. Hey Girl Hey is a platform to discuss mental health and learn from professionals and those with their own experiences. If you believe you need support, please reach out to a professional. The information shared here is not in lieu of getting professional support. So we just want to thank you so much for joining us if you are here live. And if you're watching the replay, girl, welcome too. We love it. We love to hear from y'all. So, anyways, I'm going to introduce our guest speaker, Kiva Harper. She is a licensed clinical social worker specializing in trauma, focused on psychotherapy for more than 2 decades. Kiva has emerged as one of the nation's foremost thought leaders. I mean, to be in her presence. Hello, y'all. In trauma treatment. Harper now, that's somebody's name is Harper. So I was like, wait, did I say that right? Harper now speaks and consults extensively, is a frequent mental health correspondent for network TV and radio, and contributing writer to industry trades and social media influencer. Woo, honey, we are in the presence. Okay. Kiva, did I miss anything?
No, thank you so much. It was a nice intro.
Yes. Well, thank you so much for being here. We are so glad to have you here. So glad to have you as a part of Hey Girl Hey with Brandi. So let's go ahead and kick this off. I don't want to waste any time, and I want to make sure that we have a wonderful conversation amongst
Mhm.
us. So there's a few things that I meet with each of my guests. I met with Kiva for probably no more than 15, 20 minutes, maybe about 30 minutes
Mhm.
at most.
Yeah.
And we talked through a lot of the things that I hear from you all as my viewers, who are, wanting to hear from professionals and wanting to hear how people have overcome. But in particularly, we're going to talk about trauma, of course. And we're going to talk through a few things and I gave Kiva some questions as well. And y'all know through my story, being someone who was stabbed, at least 20 times in my home by somebody that I knew that was close to our family. There was some residue that I didn't realize that
Sure.
had to deal with, especially when you go through something so physically and mentally um traumatic like that,
Yeah.
especially enduring physical pain and also mental pain that I didn't realize that I went through. I think one of the things that I lost, Kiva, was that I started to think I wasn't loved.
Mm.
Because for something like that to happen, I know that can happen for individuals, especially when you go through something so extreme.
Yeah.
So, what are ways that trauma can affect us, Kiva?
First of all, I just want to say how resilient you are, and I'm so excited that you've created this platform, based on the trauma that you went through. And I hope that there are many people that are listening and watching and that are just inspired by your story. So it's just my pleasure to be here. When you talked
Yes.
about your symptoms and what you noticed, it made me think of a few things. And so your question was, what are ways that trauma can affect you? And I jotted some
Yeah.
notes down just to make sure I covered everything. I think the first thing that we need to do is talk about what trauma is. When we think of trauma,
Yeah.
um, I don't know that we always think of all of the ways that we can have trauma. Trauma can come as a result of military combat experiences. That's
Yes.
what we mostly know of. But
Yes.
it can also come as a result of being a victim of a crime like you were, domestic violence, sexual assault,
Yep.
a car accident, have losing someone to a suicide. All of that affects us, and your body has a trauma response to it. And so when
Mhm.
we talk about the trauma responses, the fear, anxiety, and panic, those are the most common ones. Those are the things that make us most uncomfortable because you're
Yeah.
feeling extremely fearful. You're noticing that you're more
Yeah.
anxious than ever.
Yep.
Some people have panic attacks. Some people are just simply in shock, and
Yeah.
that may last for a bit. Numbness, withdrawing from things that you normally do and people that you normally talk
Mm.
to, a loss of hope for the future, feeling distant and
Yeah.
detached from others,
Yeah.
problems concentrating, feeling jumpy and being easily startled,
Yeah.
feeling on guard and alert, having upsetting dreams.
Yeah.
Maybe about that experience. Sometimes we cope by misusing substances. Sometimes we notice a loss of faith.
Yeah.
Sometimes we notice physical problems. I've worked with many people who came to me after seeing a medical doctor for physical problems that were not
Yeah.
resolved and there was no explanation for. And they were sent to therapy. And just with therapy, they started noticing that the physical issues were resolved. And then problems regulating emotions. That's another thing
Yeah.
that's really common. You may notice that you go from 0 to 10 very quickly, and you're
Yeah.
unable to stop yourself from having these, emotional outbursts or angry outbursts. All of those are normal trauma responses. That's what I think I really want to convey is that if you're
Yeah.
feeling any of these things, that it's normal. It's a normal reaction to trauma.
So, like, okay, so that's great, Kiva. I'm glad you went over all those
Mhm.
things because I experienced a lot of those. And honestly, I didn't know at the time. And
Yeah.
to be really transparent, I don't think the therapist that I was working with at the time, and they called her a counselor, but
Yeah.
I didn't really break that down. Or I think maybe the other part is that I wasn't fully present because my
Yeah.
mind was really trying to conceptualize that something so traumatic happened
Yeah.
to me and why.
Yes.
So if she went over that stuff and
Mhm.
said, "This is normal," I probably didn't conceptualize
Right.
it or take it in because I was so busy in the midst of the emotion of,
Yeah.
I just can't believe this happened to me.
Yeah.
And how could something like this happen to me for someone that I think I'm a pretty decent person. So, it's just like,
Well,
how could this have possibly happened to me? But the withdrawing
yeah.
happened. There was definitely, it was a lot of, it was hard for me to go to sleep because every
Okay.
single noise was like, what's
Yeah.
that? Did y'all hear that? Like, and
Yeah.
so Kiva, with that, how long can those actually last?
It it was something else I wanted to say. You're just saying so much stuff, and I'm like, oh gosh, I want to say this and this and this.
Yes,
But
yes,
when
love it.
I'm glad you said that about when you first went to therapy, that you didn't she may have said those things and you just didn't notice it
Yeah,
because of where you were. So a lot of where you were, what place you were in your healing. And so that's actually really common. Many people don't seek out therapy until a little bit of time has passed. And so when you ask how long
mm,
you can experience these symptoms, it varies like everyone else. Let's do an analogy of a physical trauma. Say I fell down the stairs and I broke my leg.
yeah,
Maybe how I heal and how you heal, it may not be the
yeah,
same. Maybe generally a doctor may tell me, okay, in you'll wear this cast for 6 weeks, and and if you do physical therapy, you should be back to normal by this time.
Yeah.
But we know that there are other factors involved that affects
Yeah.
each person individually, and it may take me 8 weeks, where it may take you 4 weeks. So the same thing with emotional trauma. Everyone is different, and depending on that person, their history of trauma, their
Yeah.
support system, et cetera, et cetera, all of those things factor in. So you can experience those symptoms for years. I've worked with
Wow.
people who have been living with those symptoms for 20 years untreated. And then I've worked with other people who bounce back fairly quickly. So it just really depends on the person.
Wow, what does that say? It just amazes me. Like, it's twofold. So it amazes me how God created us. So I'm thinking,
Hmm.
because I'm thinking about our makeup. Like, how for so long can somebody sit
Yeah.
with that pain, still function? Not proper, probably not properly,
Yeah.
but enough to get them by. Like,
Yeah.
how do we do that? It's just yeah,
Yeah. I like to use the word, I use the word, you'll hear me say survivors. And I say that of anyone that I work with, because even people who are actively in a situation where they're enduring trauma, I
yeah,
still say that they're strong because they are enduring this and surviving every single day. Somehow,
yeah, yeah,
let's talk about people who are in abusive relationships. And within those relationships,
yeah,
a lot of people see the strength as leaving. And while, yes, it takes courage and strength to leave that situation, but what about when leaving is not optimal for your family and you have children and you love your partner, you just don't want them to
yes. Oh my
harm
gosh,
you
so
anymore.
good.
Right. And so when that happens, that person that's in that abusive relationship, every day they wake up and every day that they're still here, they're surviving still. And so there's
Yeah,
no weakness involved in that. And so,
yeah,
the people that I've seen that have lived with this for 20 years or so, they maybe have tried therapy and other ways of getting help, maybe not the right person for them, and
yeah,
then they
yeah.
gave up because they didn't see any results, and they just continue on, and there's so much strength. A lot of the thing that invigorates me in this work is the strength of the people that I work with, that I
Mhm.
get something from that vicariously.
Yeah, no, and that does says a lot. I was actually talking to someone today about them being in a domestic violent relationship, and after that had passed, it was it takes us a different type of strength for me to recognize when you engage with someone else, like to see if you may repeat the cycle of
Yeah.
getting with someone with those behaviors.
Yeah.
And she recognized those things immediately and
Mhm.
decided, I can't do this. I can't
Mhm.
do this with this person as
Mhm.
much as I care and love for them, because I knew them from, prior life or prior, whatever. She recognized it easily, and
Mhm.
and sometimes that doesn't always happen with people, for them to
No.
trigger to be like, this is not this is very familiar, and I don't want to be back in that place
Mhm.
again. But it speaks to what you were talking about, that
Yeah.
sometimes there's children involved,
Yeah.
there's other intertwining, like a spider web, that if I walk away, I break this spider web.
Mm.
And now I don't have to figure out how to pull it back together, but I got to figure out how to now live this life with this break and
Yeah.
what has been intertwining and all the different factors as well. So no, that's
Yeah.
good.
Yeah. And
That's
trauma affects us forever. There's no getting over it. You learn to live with it and it becomes a part of who you are, but you're forever changed after you've gone through a traumatic
oh
event,
yeah.
which I'm sure you can
Oh
agree
gosh,
with. Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. You
Absolutely.
don't go back to your normal self
No,
ever.
no,
Yeah.
and it's funny that you say that. So, I find little mo interesting enough, after talking to you, I
Hmm.
pay attention to now the little things that I'm heightened to, where,
Yeah.
to your point, it probably wasn't like that before, but it's
Yeah.
definitely heightened. So
Of
today,
course.
I'm dropping off my daughter at daycare, little Michaela that you saw,
Hmm.
and, a man rolled up, and said, hey, my senses got really heightened. I was like, all right,
Mhm.
I got to protect my child. Where can I go? I just locked the door. Where did I put my keys? All of this stuff is going through my
Yeah,
mind. As
yeah.
he's talking to me, he's asking, he said, hey, my wife just told me that there is another daycare beyond the one that we're at right now, and it's in a corner or something. And so when he started, my senses went down once he started explaining stuff, and I was like, yeah, he's right, there is another one, there is this. But
Mhm,
still, it was still heightened enough to be
mhm.
like defensive mode,
Yeah,
protection. I don't
yeah,
want anything to happen to me
yeah.
because of that experience. So
Yes.
I do start to recognize, I'm like, that
Yeah.
was like 2010, and now, and I still
But you
have,
know what, Brandy? Also, we have something inside of us that tells us when something is dangerous, you know what I
yeah.
mean? And so we don't wanna ignore that either.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely, absolutely.
Mhm.
This is good. So Kiva, so we touched on this just a little bit, but and it was early on. If someone has undergone a traumatic situation and is scared to seek help, like what advice would you give them? Because I know you talked about like we talked about being in a relationship and maybe
Yeah,
you can't get out, but you know you need help,
yeah.
but you're either one, you're afraid to get help, you don't know how to get help, you
Mhm.
don't even know where to start.
Yeah.
Sometimes there's this and I know I've talked about it with other therapists, there's this I've never seen anybody else do it before,
Yeah.
so I don't know if I could talk to somebody, I don't
Mhm.
know, like how are
Yeah.
they going to really help me? So what advice would you give to that individual?
I think the most important thing is respecting their choices and their
Yeah.
decisions. But I think my job as a professional is ensuring that it's an informed decision. And so
Yeah.
just making sure they understand that, you know, this is what trauma looks like, this is how you can get help, and this is what the help looks like. This is what therapy looks like to resolve the trauma. But you know, I do believe that there are many paths to healing. And not everyone has to go through therapy to heal. Everyone is very different. And
Girl, talk
so
about
there are
that.
many
That's
paths.
good.
Yeah, it's the truth. There are many
Yes.
paths. So I'm going to respect the decision the person has made, provided they have all of the information, tools, and resources that are available to them. And, you know, I would discuss the benefits of therapy and
Yeah.
explain. Um, I think the most important thing that I ever do with survivors of trauma is to normalize the things that they're feeling, because so
Mm,
many of them
mhm.
feel like, oh, I'm crazy because these things are
Yes.
happening to me,
Oh
or
my
there's
gosh.
something wrong with me. So the first thing I do is normalize, these are symptoms. There's nothing wrong with you. These are trauma responses, and this
Yeah.
is normal for you to feel. And then I would go on to talk about the fact that you know post traumatic stress is treatable. It's very treatable, and there are
Yeah.
many tools in the toolbox to treat that. And you
Yeah.
don't have to live with these symptoms. And if they
Yeah.
still choose not to, then I would absolutely respect that, because usually when a person has experienced trauma, they they've lost their ability to be in control. Someone else has taken that away from
Oh my
them. And
gosh.
so so the
Yes.
last thing I want to do is tell them what they need to do.
Yes.
Yeah, that's not my job, is to tell them what they need to do. My job is to support, to educate if they allow me to, and then to
Yes.
respect their decisions.
That is so good because I felt violated.
Yeah.
Oh my gosh. When I went through that, because it was in my home,
Mhm.
I was intruded in what I consider to be my safe
Yeah.
space.
Yeah.
So when that's violated, like when people think of like, even when I say the word, I think of violated, like being like sexually violated. It's so much more when you have
Yes.
someone, especially like if you get robbed or
Mhm.
something, you feel violent because your safe bubble
Yeah.
has now been intruded upon.
Yeah.
And now you feel like you're out of control. You feel like you're out of control with your emotions.
Yeah.
You feel like you're out of control of protecting yourself.
Yeah.
I mean, it just, I mean, literally, Kiva, it heightened so many things.
Gosh.
Protection about my children,
Mhm.
protection about like even where I live when I moved. I immediately, when I looked for another apartment, because it happened in my home, so
Mhm.
police were there, blood
Yeah.
was all over the place. So they were just like, don't even come back to this place. Like, get
Yeah.
movers. We
Yeah.
paying for movers. Like, get
Yeah.
them to pack your stuff and get it out. So when I found a place, immediately the first thing I wanted was an apartment with gates.
Yeah.
I was like, I
So you
need
could feel
people to be
safe.
code to get into the apartment. I need and all it was just it was for my own security. And
Yeah.
I know people could, roll behind someone and get in the gate and all that other
Yeah.
stuff. But for me, it was a sense of controlled security for me because I was a single parent at that time. I
Mhm.
was like, I don't want I don't want to feel violated like that again.
Yeah.
And so no, yeah, that's
Yeah.
good, Kiva. And also, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
I was gonna say it's interesting that you say that about, because you feel violated, you were seeking out places that made you feel safer. But the one thing that's common in trauma survivors is that they don't feel safe in their bodies.
Mm, mm.
Would you say
Okay.
that that happened to you?
Huh. I don't feel safe in my body. Give me an example. That's interesting. I've never heard that before.
It's like, you're seeking out things like the gate to make you feel safer, but
Yeah.
you don't. You still feel those same symptoms, and it's because the reaction is in your body. So you don't feel safe in your body. And so establishing safety is the first point of business for
Okay.
me in the work that I do.
Yeah, yeah. No, I can definitely get with that because it was a sense like I wish there was more security. Like the
Yeah.
gate was just the community. I would have liked it if there was a gate or code or something on my door. But
Right.
it was to, you know what, Kiva, you're right, because the stab wounds were all over my face, all on my body. And so for me, I did want my body to be protected.
Mhm.
Even if I brushed it up against, because I had, and I still have stitches here, but I
Mhm.
had stitches across here and some around here around my
Mhm.
hands. And even if I brushed it up against, I jerked back so
Yeah.
bad because I
Yeah.
didn't want to harm myself.
Yeah.
So I can definitely get with that because there were moments like that. And
Mhm.
also I found myself um insecure about how I looked as
Mhm.
well.
Mhm.
Now it's different for everyone else because mine was more physical. So I was trying to protect my image or the way that I look or not having a lot of questions because I didn't want those things to be brought
Yeah.
back up
Yeah.
when people ask. So that was also hard because I felt like I was dutching it,
Yeah.
dodging people so I wouldn't have to talk to them so I can
Yeah.
avoid having to rehash this
Yeah.
story. So and I think that's why a little bit of the isolation came into
Mhm.
play because I just wanted to stay to myself and that's where I felt withdrawal. And
Yeah.
so you talking about these things, I'm like, where was Kiva when I went through all of this stuff? I swear, because it would have helped me unpack a lot
Yeah.
of the things that I was feeling because I didn't understand. For one thing, Kiva, I never seen anybody go through that to tell
Yeah.
me how they felt, what was going on. So
Mhm.
I'm the first of
Yeah.
experience something like this, and so I'm trying to figure it out as I go.
Figure out how to navigate it. Yeah.
Yes, and all I wanted to do was get into normalcy. I wanted
Mm.
to be normal. I wanted to I wanted to jump back into work, and I know so
Yeah.
many of us, we try to do that after experiencing something like that. We're just like, "Well, I gotta take care of my kids.
Yeah.
I got this at home. I have that. I don't have time to be worried about my emotions
Yeah.
or my physical body. I need to hurry up and heal and move on."
Yeah.
And I don't know how many times I dealt with I went through that. It was
Yeah.
peaks and valleys of it, and I think even when I went back to work, I thought I went back too soon. I thought
Yeah.
maybe I think it was like maybe 3 or 4 months I was out, but I felt like that when I got back to work and I was dealing with stuff and dealing with people, I was just like,
Yeah.
maybe it was too soon.
Yeah.
But to your point early on, everybody's different.
Yeah.
So I was fortunate enough, Kiva, to be surrounded with people at such a young age because it happened probably around like when I was 26,
Mhm.
give or take. And I can say I was surrounded by people who wanted to see me heal.
It
Um,
makes a difference.
it does
It
make a
does.
difference. It really does. And they were there for me. They welcomed me back into work. Even my coworkers were a part of that
Mhm.
healing. They were there for me. They checked up on me. They asked me if I needed anything. They gave me a hug when I needed a hug. They let
Mhm.
me cry when I needed to cry. When I needed to step away from my desk, they let me do it. And that made the difference. When you
Yeah,
don't have that, I feel like it's another layer of strength that you that
I
you
would agree.
have,
Mhm.
because as a to not have it, I just couldn't imagine. I was
Yeah,
so surrounded. So it's such a blessing.
yeah.
So Kiva, it goes into what I'm about to ask you. So what are some general steps people can take? No, you know what, Kiva? Sorry, my mind. This is the way I work. You said something early on that there are different ways for people to heal and recover,
Mhm.
or there's different routes. It's not always a therapy.
Yeah,
I want you to touch on that a little bit because that's interesting to me.
yeah,
I know there's other ways, but nobody has just sat down and said,
yeah,
here's some other ways
yeah.
on how that can be done.
It's just so many things, obviously I'm a fan of therapy and being able to talk
Yeah.
through it and work with someone who knows how to treat trauma. But there are people that rely on their faith, and their faith gets them through.
Mhm.
Just
Mhm.
traditionally in the African American community, we've healed in community.
Yeah.
That's how we've
Yes.
healed. And
Oh,
so
yeah.
some people, like you, being surrounded by a good, strong, positive support system. Not
Yeah.
everyone has that, but if you do, sometimes that can be enough. And then
Yeah.
there are other factors, like if you've not had previous trauma and it's an isolated incident, maybe your path to healing may not be as complex as
Yeah.
someone who has endured trauma, most of their lives. So it really just depends on the person. I don't even know all the things that can be done to heal, but I am certainly not a fan of putting anyone in a box and saying this is the
Yes.
way to get better, because I'm not the expert on you. I know
Yeah.
trauma, but I don't know Brandi. You know Brandi, and
Yeah.
you know what Brandi needs better than anyone else. And who am
Yeah.
I to tell you uh, that it needs to look differently than what you think it
Yeah.
should? Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. That's really good. And that's so encouraging, Kiva, because many people need to hear that, because
Mhm.
sometimes we can throw out therapy because now it's a thing. People
Yeah.
are now seeing, it's being more socialized within our community, but also to encourage people that it may not, and
Yeah.
that's okay. You may be standing on your faith and that gets you through, or you
Yeah.
may have a community that gets you through, and that is okay. I think the biggest encouragement that I always try to give to people is at least have a space or a place where you can talk it out. Get
Yes.
get those things out of
A
you.
safe space. That's
Yes.
important, because you can have people that will hold space for you, but they're not safe.
Absolutely.
Mhm.
Absolutely. That's a word right there.
Mhm.
And so my pastor says something very similar to that. He was talking about that. So I think you're right.
Mhm.
He was talking about, where do you break? Where do you have your breaking points, your break, breaking out in front of Jesus, but also who are the people that you're
Yeah.
breaking out in front of? And maybe
Yeah.
you're breaking in front of the wrong people. And so
Yeah.
to your point, it's having a safe space, a space that is right for you to be able to do that. So I know that, Kiva, we're coming up on time. This is all good stuff.
Mhm.
So, but I do want to ask you one more question. So,
Okay.
what are some general steps people can take towards recovery? And I think it kind of goes in tandem of what you just mentioned, but is
Mhm.
there anything else that individuals can do to, I don't want to say mitigate the healing and the
Yeah.
recovery process, but to help the process?
Definitely seeking, treatment early on is going to be helpful,
Mhm,
obviously.
mhm.
When you notice yourself having those symptoms and you're not bouncing back quickly, well, not quickly, but if you're not bouncing back after a few weeks, it might be a good idea to reach
That's
out to a
good.
professional. One of the things I will say, when you were talking about your previous counselor, I'm not sure who she is or what her background is. And again, you can't even remember what she may have said, but we have this I don't even know how I want to say it. There's this movement for everyone to be trauma informed, and being trauma informed is great, but what being trauma informed means is that you understand traumatic responses, and you
Mhm,
don't do any more damage, you don't do any
mhm.
further damage. But
Yes,
if you're going
yes.
to seek out treatment, you need a trauma focused therapist, someone
Mm,
who knows how to treat the trauma. And there are
mhm.
multiple, evidence based modalities of treatment out there that have been proven to be effective. And so you need to, if you go into treatment, talk to your therapist, make sure that they truly specialize in trauma and not just be trauma informed, because there is a difference. Then if they are trauma focused therapists, ask them which treatments do they use, and they should
Yeah,
have more than one, because there's no cookie cutter approach. I
yeah,
have
yeah.
multiple tools in my toolbox. If this doesn't work, let's try this, let's try this,
Oh,
let's
that's
do what
good.
works for you. And not, I can't use the one thing that I like to do all the time, because that may not fit everyone. So I would say, seek out treatment early on. That's very
Yeah.
helpful. Also, just understanding the traumatic reactions, knowing that there's nothing wrong with you.
Yes,
There is a
yes.
book by Bessel van der Kolk is his name, and the book is called "The Body Keeps the Score." And I
Mhm,
encourage my clients to read that when they're in therapy with me, because it really helps to explain what trauma looks like. And there's a quote from the book that I wanted to share, and it's: trauma is not the story of something that happened back then. It's the current imprint of the pain, horror, and fear living inside people. And
mm,
that's the real issue. So it's not,
yeah,
if we were going to use you as an example, it's not the fact that you were stabbed multiple times in your home.
mhm.
It's what that left behind, that
Yeah,
that fear, that pain,
mhm,
the horror, all of that.
mhm.
You having to think about how safe where, the place that you live is,
Yeah,
you being at work and having to take a moment for yourself, and
yeah,
then wondering how that's going to be received. It leaves this imprint. And
yeah,
so trauma treatment helps to rewire the brain, because the central nervous system is altered after we've
yeah.
experienced a trauma. And so that's what the treatment is.
Yeah, that's good, Kiva. Thank you
Mhm.
so much. I so appreciate this conversation. It was so good. Okay.
Okay.
All
Okay.
about it. Now, so Kiva, if is there any products or services or anything that you wanted to mention before we drop tonight?
I am taking the rest of the year off formally. I'm still here
Yeah.
working, but I don't have any big things planned for the rest of the year. But you
Okay.
can find me on my website. It's kivaharper.com. And then all of my social media handles are on there. And so that's the best way to keep up with me. Right now, I really am very excited about doing trainings and providing trainings
Yeah.
to companies, to corporations, to smaller groups. That's what I enjoy doing. So if that's a need, please reach out to me for that.
Yeah, that's awesome. Thank you so much, Kiva. We really
Thank
do appreciate it.
you.
Thank you to my viewers for watching. Thank you for those who are watching the replay. If there's any comments or questions that you have, just comment down below and we'll be sure to get them to Kiva. But thank you so much for watching, and we'll see you next Friday at 6:30 with my special guest. It would actually be my oldest daughter, Danielle Martinez. We actually are going to have a conversation about how we had to get therapy in our relationship and how it helped us, and how having family conversations in a safe environment, to your point, Kiva,
Hmm.
how that got us through and how we're in such a better place. So meet me here next Friday, 6:30, same place, same time, and I will see y'all next Friday. Thank you, y'all.
Thank you.